Trump's election marked a drastic change for this country, and whenever the United States makes a drastic change, comedy also needs to shift with it. To quote Jon Stewart in his first Daily Show after 9/11,
and we don't take that for granted here by any stretch of the imagination, and our show has changed. I don't doubt that. What it's become, I don't know. Subliminable is not a punchline anymore. One day it will become that again, and Lord willing, it'll become that again because it means that we have ridden out the storm.
Now, I'm not comparing Trump to 9/11. After all, he was right there helping people at ground zero. What I'm saying is that these were both big political and societal shifts that would change entertainment with them. It's often what politicizes comedians in the first place. Before Trump, I wasn't doing a news show where I wore a violently unwashed suit. I was making dumb sketches and music and junk. I mean, I still do that too, but I also have to do this now. They won't let me stop. I once did an entire parody video where I made up a fake Dave Matthews Band song for just like, I don't know why I did that, but it was funny. Point is that these changes happen all the time. It's just how society works. Like, when people say you couldn't make a film like Blazing Saddles today, the answer is, I guess, yes? Yeah, you couldn't make any old film today because that's how time works, right? You know, we used to love slapstick and westerns and then stopped. There was a point not too long ago where kids were wearing inflated circus jeans and that was sexy because culture changed. Judd Apatow was cutting edge at one point. South Park was the height of edgy and absurdist satire, and all they had to do at the time was kill Kenny over and over again and perform gay stereotypes. Everything gets stale as time lurches on. Jokes get old. Things that are seen as progressive suddenly become standard ideas, and so forth. It's not confusing. It's actually the opposite of that. And as the mid-2000s turned into the late 2000s, it really seemed like we were making meaningful steps forward. We had our first black president and legalized gay marriage, and we're ignoring all the drone murder and so on. And one of the responses from entertainment was a push towards edgy roast-style humor. We felt like it was safe to take satirical jabs at historically oppressed people as a sort of parody of prejudice. Look no further than the fact that one of the hottest comedians at the time was a white dude who often made shock jokes about rape and racism under the idea that he wasn't really a bad person, but just doing it all ironically. Who was that guy? Right. See, around 2016 and 2017, two very specific things happened that would change comedy. Trump would get elected, and Louis C.K. would get found out for being a bit of a sex criminal. And so in a very short amount of time, the era of edgy insult humor against women and minorities just felt like really gross. We began to realize that some of these edgy comics weren't actually doing a character. And we got a very real reminder that non-cis and non-white people still didn't have it great. Something I suspect they already knew. And comedy took another shift. Insult comics either became self-aware enough to change their profession or just stopped getting booked. And a lot of them were somewhat conservative leaning. This is probably what a lot of them perceive as cancel culture. But the reality is just that we weren't buying what they were selling anymore. Because time happened. Meanwhile, as you no doubt recall, conservatives lost their fucking minds. Trump, a man who is objectively funny both on purpose and by accident, became the person the Republican Party had to get behind as their totally competent and good leader. He made every issue divisive, started his MAGA and QAnon cult, and just threw conservatives so far to the right that they looked nothing like themselves even a decade ago. Somehow, the most ghoulish of grifters like Tompo Watterson would start new Trump-era shows that quickly rose in the ratings. White supremacists marched in the streets, and mass shootings by angry, mostly white, often racist young men became an epidemic. And those were the shootings that weren't done by cops. And so on. We've already done a bunch of videos about that stuff, like, I don't know, all the videos we've ever made, so I won't get into it. But what came out of this is an era where edgy insult comics, no matter their political affiliation, didn't really have a place anymore. After all, the least funny insult comic during this era was the President of the United States. Why would we want more of that? The world was cruel and bizarre enough, and conservative comedians suddenly had a way different audience they had to appeal to. Or in the case of the older ones, they also drank the Kool-Aid and became extremely unfunny. Because once you get to a point where you have to act like Trump, an objectively hilarious person is somehow a competent and serious president, you can no longer do relatable comedy. So the only option is to sort of ignore the reality and just focus on culture war stuff, also known as the quest to trigger the libs. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.